Hello friends, welcome. In this tutorial, we're gonna make something which is better than the render you see in here. And I'm gonna say you why. Okay, here it is, and these are all the nodes. This is just based on a simple curve, and we can see that the strings are merged together. Let me show you for better performance. First, mute them off. And yeah, we have it. We can just play with this. Okay, you can see that. Focus on the tip in here. You can see it looks like that it's growing and wanna consume things. You can see that. Let me show you from the top. And it can go in any direction like this. It goes and consumes things. You can animate this. It's so cool. Okay, now let's do this. Okay, let me make a berserker first. Set the radius to something about 2.5 and geometry nodes, resample it a little bit to some higher value like 200 first. Okay, in here I want to scatter some of the curves, some of the copy of the curve around the main object, so I use duplicate elements. I set it to something like 20, and I should set this to spline to work. Now we can see that all of the instances are just in the same position, overlap to each other. So I want to scatter them around the main object. So I use set position. I want to use a noise texture in here. Well, if I apply the noise texture, I should use the color because color is a 3D vector, not a factor. Factor is just a one-dimensional value, like something between 0 and 1. If I just plug the color, you can see that all the copies, all the instances are simultaneously moved to new position. So I need just unique noise texture for each instance. So I use 4D in here, and I can get a W factor in here. It acts like a seed value. So I use duplicate index, which is unique for every instance, and plug it in W, so I can have different noise texture for each spline. And I lower the scale in here to something like 0.6. Okay, for now. You can see that if I turn it off and on, they are moved along this vector. They are not scattered around the main object. Why? And that's because of the noise texture. The noise texture value are between 0 and 1, and we want them to be somewhere between minus 0.5 and 0.5, so we can scatter around the main object. So I subtract this, vector math, subtract by 0.5. Now we have it. Look. Yeah. And I want to use scale for having control over the domain. Oh, I should plug it in first. Now you can see. Okay. Here is where I want higher scale on the endpoints and lower in middle. So how can I do that? There's something called spline parameters, and we have factor in here. Let me show what is factor. Okay, you can see that each spline has a factor between 0 and 1. The black point is 0 and the white is 1. And it gradually increases on each point to the 1 value. Okay, you can see this in spreadsheet, in geometry node. I turn this on, and you can see this in viewer. In here it's from 0 to 0.5789 and to finally to 1. Okay, so I can bring color ramp in here and plug this factor to the factor of color ramp. It means when the factor is 0, the color is black, and the factor is 1, the color is white, which means that when the color is white, it means that the output value is 1, and the color is black, which means that the output value is 0. So I plug it to scale. You can see that the scale is 0 in here. I want something like this. At another point, I can hover on this and Control C and come here, Control V. Okay. Now I lost my scale, global scale. I just copy this here. You can see that I have control over the points of the spline. You can see a little bit lower. Okay. Now I want some twisting effect, rotating effect in the middle part, mostly in the middle part of my these strings. Okay, and first let me show you something. Let me convert this to mesh to see better. Circle curve or curve circle. Okay, you can see when we move this, it has the same effect, like a growing effect. Okay, but we don't have that twisting thing in the middle. So here is where we have some explanations, because for converting the regular line to the spiral, we need to understand the function first. So let's get to the explanation scene. Here we are. Okay, here is the circle we have. Actually, the function of making a circle or a spiral are somehow like each other. And you can assume that you can see that this circle is actually a group of points, and assume that the radius of this circle is 1, because we can change the radius at the last step, so we don't want to worry about this. When the circle is in xz plane, for example, like our word axis in here, when it's in this plane, every point should have x1 and z1 coordinate. So if this angle is theta, the x1 is 1 multiplied by cosine of theta, and z is actually sine of theta. But we can see that since it's a 2D plane, 2D xz plane, the y value for all the points are the same. So here is the difference between the circle and a spiral. For a spiral, it's like this, that when theta grows, the y should grow either. Like this. You can see, when theta grows, the y also grows. So let me make it from scratch in here. Okay, I should delete them first because I already made them. Delete everything. Okay. Now we use a set position. I said when the theta grows, the y should grow either. Or it could be in the opposite way. When the y grows, the theta should grow. But instead of y, we can use something better. We can use the factor. Because we don't want to be worried about the orientation of this spline. Y value is just a global direction, and our spline could be rotated in anywhere, so we don't need that. We want to be the factor because it's always along the curve. So I use a multiply in here. No, first let me use sine and cosine. It's actually math node which is set on sine. In here I'm actually using the factor instead of y value as theta, so I want to have control over our theta. So let's do something like 1 first. Now use combine x, y, z and plug it to offset. And we said that x1 is cosine of theta, so we plug the cosine to x, and z is sine of theta. Of course, there shouldn't be any difference between them, because if we just change the position of sine to x and cosine to z, the only difference would be the rotation of our spiral. Instead of rotating clockwise, it would rotate counterclockwise. And in our project, who cares? Because we just need a spiral. Okay, so don't worry about that. It doesn't look like a spiral because of this theta. It's not enough, so we increase this and we can see, yeah, it got the shape. And the radius, I said we can change this at the last step. In here we can set the scale and just decrease or increase the scale. Okay, but there is a problem in here. Let me go to top view. Let me increase a little bit. Okay. In here, since we use x, y, z vectors, they are global axis. So our spiral is always perpendicular to this y axis and always in x, z plane. Okay? Look at this. Let me turn it off first and change the position of the handle. We want our spiral to be something like this, always perpendicular to our curve. Okay, but since we use this global axis, it's always like this, along the x and z axis. Okay, we can see that. It's always like this. You can see this is not what we want. We want this to be always perpendicular to the tangent of the curve. So we have a better shape. Now it means that we need local axis. We should define our local axis instead of using this XYZ global axis. Okay, so we come in here and we have a little bit of explanations in here. Actually, these explanations, understanding them is important because you can use them in your future projects. So actually I'm doing all this stuff because I want you to learn how things work so you can make your own ideas. I just don't want you to follow my steps and reach the final result in this project. I want you to make your own ideas. We said we need our local axis, something like this. It should be always perpendicular to our curve, okay? Something like this. So first we should consider a point to work on it like this in here, and every point has a tangent axis like this. Okay, and we want our vectors to be perpendicular to the tangent. Okay, it means that it should be they should be in this plane, which is perpendicular to the tangent. Some vectors like this, and these two vectors also should be perpendicular to each other because they are axes like this XYZ axis. They are perpendicular and they should be, because we're gonna make a vector in this axis. Okay, and they could be in any direction, but they should be perpendicular and they should follow the same rule in all our curve length, or something like this. You can guess that we have one of these two vectors, and that's the normal vector. This is the normal axis of my curve, so I need another vector which should be perpendicular both to the tangent and the normal. It should be something like this. Let me turn it on. No, before that, before turning on, I should say we want to make a vector like this. We don't have it. We can use cross product. When we use a cross product of tangent and normal, it gives me a vector which is perpendicular to the plane of normal and tangent. This plane. It should be a vector which is perpendicular to this plane, which is this vector. Okay, of course the order matters in cross product. If we use this order, normal multiplied by tangent, our vector would be something like this. But as I said, who cares? The only difference is the rotation of our spiral, and we don't care about that. Okay, so in here we have our two vectors, our two local vectors, which they are always perpendicular to our curve. So let me turn off this plane. Tangent. Yes, here is our two vectors. It's always perpendicular to the curve, and we can use it. Just always keep in your mind the cross product and dot product. Okay, they are so useful. You can use them in your projects. Before going to our main scene, I wanted to say that these are normalized vectors. Means the magnitude is 1, because the tangent and the normal are normalized vectors, so this is also a normalized vector. We want the magnitude of these vectors should be something like cosine of theta and sine of theta. Okay, so after adding them, we would have a vector which actually moves the points to make a spiral shape. Okay, so we jump to the main scene. In here I need another set position. Okay, the spline parameter again, sine, and cosine. Multiply. Now we need our vectors, which are normal and tangent. We also need normal because of the cross product in here. As I mentioned before, you don't need to be worried about the order, because the only change is our spiral rotation. And here we have this. Now we want to scale these vectors, the normal and the cross product of normal and tangent, because we want the magnitude of sine and cosine. Okay, now we add them to have a final vector for using in set position. Okay, it's messed up. That's because of this frequency. Now we have our spiral. I can lower the radius so we can see this better. You can see that. More frequency. Okay, the radius is too much, so I decrease the radius by scaling this. Like this. Okay, now it's always perpendicular to the spline tangent, you can see. And okay, in here I want the twisting effect just in the middle, not on the tips endpoints. Okay, so we do something like here we did. We use color ramp and factor. Let it move them a little bit back. Okay, I need another scale for this. Plug it to scale. And I need something like this. You can change it however you like. Okay, let me show you something. This is my simple spline in here. You can see that we can do many things with it. You can use it in hair for styling your hair. You see? Okay, the scale is too much. Frequency need more. And I need also, let me show you this first. Let me higher the scale and turn it off. You can see that all of the scale I mean, the scale of all of the splines are like the same, almost the same. But we want random scale for each spline, okay? So I can use random value. I can plug this to directly to this scale, but I want to have my global scale in here, so I use another scale and plug this to here. Okay, this shape, it looks like this because the random value is actually applied on each point, and we don't want that. We want each spline to have random value, okay? So in ID of this random value, we need to plug the duplicate index, which is the index of each spline. Okay, now we can see that we have different radius for different splines. Okay, now we can turn it on, decrease my global scale. It's a little bit too much, and also let me set this to something between, don't know, like this. Also increase frequency. I want to scatter them more. I need to lower this value. Okay, now let me take a look. You can see it's growing and has the twisting effect. Now we have this. It's just compress them. Okay. One other thing is that we have same thickness for all of our curves. So I need random value for set curve radius. Set it to 1. Now I can plug this random. Also, you can see that we have different radius for each point, and we don't want that. We want duplicate index again. Plug it to ID. Now you can see that we have different radius for different curves in here. Set this something like 0.2 or 0.3 to 1.1. Don't know, or 1 is okay. You can play with this. And I also like set the growing tip. For example, it's here. I want the tips to have almost 0 scale. Okay, so I need this set again. This is so useful, you can see that. Almost 0. Okay, I want to multiply this random value by this color. Now you can see the tips. Here is the factor 1. Where is my pen? Okay. Factor 1, factor 0, so it means that in factor 1 we have 0 or almost 0 radius. And I want to just slide this to here. Now we can see the tips are so much smaller. Now let's take a look at the effect. And also after making it longer, you can increase the frequency in here to have a better effect. Okay. And I also like give a global noise to this object. So let me do this before setting the radius scale in here. Use another set position, and I want to use this noise texture set. Okay. I want a small scale in here, and I need just the regular noise in here, 3D. And I don't know if I need this in here. Let me check it. Change the scale. Cut this off. Okay, let me check it, how it changed this shape. Turn it off, on, off, on. Okay, I want this. It's okay. 0.3. Okay. Whatever you like. And at last, I wanna, if you like this, you can keep it. I just want a little bit more details in this, like converting this to volume. Okay. Exterior bandwidth to something like 0.004, because radius of each splines are too small, so I need this to be super small. And voxel amount, here is not enough voxel amount. I like to use the size type in here, but you should be careful about this voxel size. You shouldn't just go super small. Something like 0.01. You can see that there is not enough voxel in here. Okay, let's convert this to mesh. Okay, we have this in here. You can see not enough voxels, but that's okay. I use a smooth modifier at last step, so we should set shade smooth in here. Okay, and you also can use this lack of voxels as an effect, because it's likely a organic object, so this wobbling effect could be useful. And at last we want to use set material and give your proper material to this, but in modifier I want to use the smooth and set it to something like 10 or 15. These are separated, that's because of the lack of voxels. You can see in here that the nearest splines are meshed together and made such effect. I wanna, let me increase this to 1. I don't know if it changed anything. Okay, it's better. Okay, that's it guys. Hope you learned something from this video, and if you like this, please hit the like button and see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.